Well, here we are at the Understanding God Masterclass. This is a class in which we advertised about, has 10 segments to it. Each one are an hour long. This one is the first one, and we're going to talk about before creation. And we're going to stay in Genesis 1 through 3. I hope you have the PDF. The PDF, if I'm going to try to get that posted underneath the video here in YouTube. And the PDF looks like this. It's just pages that have room for you to be able to write. It has the questions and scriptures so you can study beforehand. We're going to be talking about things which are important to understanding God. I believe that most of the problems people have in how they think of God and how they react to God and what they blame God for, what they blame Satan for, is because they do not understand Genesis 1, 2, and 3, which really covers everything that we need to know about God, the set laws, all of the why God made us, what are there aliens, what's truth and lies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these things that we're going to be talking about on this list I showed you just a minute ago. And that's all in the PDF. You'll be able to see that. Okay, so what we're going to talk about first, and we're going to be talking about before creation. We're going to talk about God and Satan. Now, before creation, meaning how much information can we get, or how much information does God give us that tells us about what happened before we get to this particular point where you and I are here. And remember that we live in this time. So we don't live in the time of Abraham, we don't live in the time of Adam, we don't live in the time of Noah. There are some big things that have happened that where we live, and there have been precedents made in which we think this is truth when it's not. And one of the things we want to discuss for certain is God and Satan. Now, God and Satan are two entities that are diametrically opposed. As we know, anyone who studies the Bible, as anyone knows, God cannot do evil and Satan cannot do good. You know, good and evil cannot exist at the same time. Now, it doesn't mean that God and Satan can't exist at the same time, but you can't do good and evil at the same time. If you do evil, you're not doing good, and if you do good, you're not doing evil. That's why he says such things as up and down and light and darkness and in and out, or if you're with God, then you love God. If you're not, you're his enemy, that kind of thing. So these opposites are shown to us, and God shows us that just in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. In Genesis 1, God spends the entire chapter, spends the entire chapter telling us exactly who he is and what he does. So every time you read something, for example, let's see about verse 10, where it says, God called the dry ground land and gathered waters. He called seas, and he saw that it was good. He goes on each day as he looks at things, and he says he sees it, and he said it was good. Verse 18, and God saw that it was good. And then verse, what was it? 21, and God saw it was good, and so on. So he spends this entire chapter saying anything from God is good. He defines it that way. Listen to at the very end, verse 31, he saw all he had made, and it was very good. No, meaning it's from him. So anything that comes from him is good. This is why Jesus said, you call me good. There's no one good but God. He's saying, because you're calling me good, you can see that I'm from God and that I am God. And these key issues we have lost because of what people have done in the past and what we're accustomed to believing today. Over and over and over and over and over, God says, good is from me. Now, the problem with it is we look out there, and I remember a conversation I had with a lady one time, and she was talking about this man who wanted to be a missionary. And she said, he can't be wrong in what he's doing. Look how good he is with his children. Okay. Now, good is not defined by man as socially acceptable or kind or whatever we define it. But being good is defined by God, and it either is of God or it's not of God. And if it's not of God, then it's not good. Okay? It's hard for us to imagine that someone is wicked when they are just, they seem like they're just like us. However, even though we've done bad things and we may have bad or evil thoughts, we're good people because we have been washed in the blood, and that makes us God's people. So we're covered. It doesn't mean you just do whatever you want. Now, you understand all this. We're not getting into that. We're talking about how conditions were before creation. And what we see is that there is a God, and there's also Satan, who is a God. Now, he talks about that in the New Testament. Jesus does. Remember when Jesus comes to his ministry, the whole purpose of his ministry is to dispel the lies. He comes in, he says, okay, you say it's this way, but I'm telling you it's that way. And he's saying, here's what you say is right, but you're following a lie, and here's the truth. Now, I know many people think that Satan is a fallen angel, and that he was created by God, and God wanted to take over heaven. He wanted to do more than what God allowed, and that's impossible because of the fact that anything that is of God is going to be good. You can't have a new concept or a new character come into that person because everything from God is good. And notice Jude 6 says that all fallen angels are locked in chains, or bound in chains, and awaiting the judgment. Angels were created by God, but Satan was not. Satan's evil. Now we see when Satan comes in Genesis 3, that he gives a total different and opposite point of view. You remember when Satan said, well, what did God say? And Eve said, well, he said, if we eat of this fruit, we will die. And Satan says, you will not die. So now, see, it's absolutely diametrically opposed concept. And we can see that it comes from two different sources. Now, I know you're going to have trouble with this. I don't blame you, because, like I said, we live on this side of the truth. What I mean by that is if this is the truth, all the way over here is the truth, and we establish something that's so very close to the truth, it looks like the truth, even sounds a lot like the truth, but it isn't, and it becomes our precedence. And so now our truth is here, and we establish something else, and it becomes truth, and then this is our truth now. We're a long way from where we started. And what if we get all the way over here? This is what is talked about being progressive. They're progressing, but they're progressing away from the truth. Now, As you can imagine, the way that the nation of America started, there was this honoring of God. The religion was all about God, and they never considered any of the other religions in the world other than Judaism and Christianity. And they only tolerated Judaism because they knew that that's where Christianity or evolved into Christianity. Now, the word Satan means worthy opponent. It's not the same as the word devil. Devil means the source of evil. God means the source of good. And we can see this. Now, how do we know it's a source? Okay, that's good. Let's go to the prodigal son in Luke 15, and let's take a gander at that. Luke 15, prodigal son, which starts with in verse 11 there. 15, there we go. All right. Jesus continued. There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in a wild living. There are some versions that say a foreign country, and that's a very good translation. Because here he says it's a distant country. Okay, but no matter what, the word country certainly shows it's not the same country that he was in before, and doesn't have the ruler who was the father. Now there's a different ruler in another country, and their things are different. So when I go over to Russia, and I'm going to go over and visit my wife's place and her family over there, and I'm going to talk with them. I can't talk in English to them unless they know English. Most of those people do not. Now there are some who do, and they're very good at conversing in English. But I'm saying, for the most part, they don't, and the laws are not the same. Things that go on there are not the same as they are here in America. When you go there, you're a foreigner to them. And the language they speak is different. And the ways they do things, the attitude they have, the laws they have set up and everything is totally different than they are here. Now, let's go on. After he spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country. He began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his field and to feed pigs. He longed for his stomach to be filled with the pods the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So he came to his senses, and he said, "How many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am, starving to death. I'll set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and earth, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me one of your hired men." So he got up and he went to his father. Now, so he goes to his father, who is in a different land. What does it mean? It means his father has a different set of rules by which he has to live than in the land he had gone to. He couldn't do what he wanted to do in his father's land. It wasn't available. And he had to go to a different land in order to find it. All right, now that's the prodigal son. And that puts us in this position of seeing these two separate lands with two separate rulers. Now, let's take a look at John 8. Just hold on now. Let me qualify that. Turn to John 8, verses 42 through 47. Very clear answer. 42, John 8, verse 42. Jesus said to them, "If God were your father, you would love me, for I came from God." Okay. What does the word father mean? It means source. If God was your father, you'd love me because I come from the Father. So you know me, you know who I am, you would love me, you would feel comfortable with me, you'd be enjoy being around me because this is who I am, and that would be who you are. So it's no surprise because I'm from the Father. We just fit right in. When I was over in Russia the very first time, and I'd gone there to meet with my wife and to see what she was like in order to determine whether or not I'm going to marry her. Went over there and to do that, and I would listen to the TV, and of course the TV's in Russian. I listen to the people coming over talking, they're talking in Russian. And when there would be one person who'd come in and say something in English, it was like peace and music could come to my ears because it was something I was accustomed to and it felt good. And that's what he's saying here. If you were of my Father, you would love me. You would enjoy who I am. Now, let's go and finish that. And now am here. I have not come on my own, but he sent me. Verse 3. Why is my language not clear to you? Because you are unable to hear what I say. Now, why is my language tough and you can't understand it? Why is it that when I speak in some other language, you do not understand what I say? Почему вы не понимаете, что я сказал? Okay, if you don't understand what I'm saying, how can you respond? What makes my speaking different? Because I'm from a different place with a different set of rules, my Father, and the language my Father has. Okay, what's my Father's language? Let's listen. He says, you, 44, you belong to your father, the devil, and you will carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth. There is no truth in him. Now, did you hear that? When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Okay, he's the source of all lies. When he speaks lies, that is his language. It's not God's language. What's God's language? He says it's truth. Because when he speaks, he's not speaking any truth. So therefore, the language of God and the way of God is truth. God's the source of truth. Satan's the source of lies, diametrically opposed. The two cannot get together. You can't say the truth and a lie at the same time. Okay, then he goes on, verse 45. Yet because I tell you the truth, you do not believe me. Can any of you prove me guilty? And so on. Now, he said he's a murderer from the beginning. So now here's what we see from this. If this is the way Satan is, and this is the way God is, what we see are diametrically opposed things. Truth, life, or not death, love. What do we see over here? Lies, death, and hatred. So we don't see the same things from each person. They're diametrically opposed, two different sources of the same thing. Now, it's very important that we understand that, so that whom we blame is the key. We've got to make sure that, you hear these things. They say, well, let's say if a hurricane comes or a tornado comes, that's an act of God. Well, the reality is it's an act because of sin, because because of the way that people were. Noah had to build an ark, and the world was changed forever, and the greenhouse effect was gone. And here we have war between winter and summer. And that war has volatile times in it. I mean, hail and storms like you can't believe. You hadn't lived in the middle of America, you have no idea how bad the storms can be. And if you've not been out on the ocean and seen these storms, you don't know. These hurricanes are just horrible, and they carry with them tornadoes and wind like you can't imagine. If you hadn't lived in those areas, you don't know. And people call those acts of God. That's not acts of God. That was an act because of sin and because people followed Satan. Now, see how important this is that we establish who's responsible for what. Because you see, if God had created Satan, then he would be responsible for the evil or the pain and suffering that Satan gives. But the pain and suffering comes from following the lies. If you follow the truth, you won't have that pain and suffering because of the fact that you're following the truth. All right, now we're going to get into that a little more later when we get to, where is that? That'd be point number 8, in which we're going to study the truth and lies very well and see how that is established according to God. Now, anytime God makes a statement, he qualifies it. You know, like in Acts 2, when he says the people were heard tongues, he qualifies it as known earthly languages in which they were born, their own dialect. So anytime he speaks of tongues from then on, man knows that the definition in Acts 2 is going to apply now. So the same thing is true here. In the very beginning, God qualifies what is good, that's of God. And he qualifies what is evil, and that's of Satan. He has qualified that and said that it can't be any other way. That's why he says, he tells them the truth. He spent so much time with them, telling them what was true. Only one thing that they had to worry about, and that was for them to live. They did not eat of that tree, the tree with of good and of knowledge of good and evil. Now, if they did eat of it, then they would die. And when Satan comes and he says you will not die, so these things are there and they're exposed to man, and man makes a decision. Okay, now that's the sources of good and evil. Now, I want you to consider this. The word Satan means a worthy opponent, or certainly what's the word I want to say? An equal opponent. So let's say you had a big wrestling match, and you were going to have people come, and the Hulk is going to come, and he's going to step in the ring, and he's standing there, and boy, he's got this big robe on, and he's just massive with muscles everywhere, and he steps in the ring, and the crowd goes wild, and he goes out and he throws off his cloak, this cape and everything he has on, and he's standing there putting his muscles up and kissing them. You know how he does. And then on the other side of the ring, in comes somebody takes a little baby and puts the baby in there, and the baby crawls out to the middle of the ring and sits there, and they're looking around, and you would say, this is not a fair match. This can't be a war. He can't be the enemy of this huge hulking man. Right. Which any created being cannot overcome the creator. It's logical, can't. And so when we think about the word Satan as being an equal opponent or an equal adversary, then we have to understand equal. And Jesus in John 8 equates God the Father with the Father, Satan. And because we choose between good and evil, means that they are equal. Now, it's going to take you some time to think about it, but we'll understand this. If I had a whiteboard and I wanted you to read something on the whiteboard, I can't do anything but white on the board. You can't get anything else from it. In order for me to do something on that board, something new has to be introduced. Okay? That's why God says, use the words up and down and black and white and light and darkness and morning and evening and so on and so forth. He gives these specific opposites so we can know that we're talking about two entities. He even calls Satan the God of this age and the God of the world. And so, all right, now let's go to point B. Point B says that it is a choice between God and Satan. So let's turn over to Genesis 2 here, and let's see what's going on in Genesis 2. Now, there's a lot more we could have said about Genesis 1. You know, we could have talked about kind after kind. We could have talked about man's made in God's image and how we could have talked about God being 3 and 1 and all that kind of stuff. We could have talked about how's God die. We're not going to talk about that because of the fact that we're concerned with first getting a grasp on the fact that there is God and Satan, okay? And that God and Satan are in a war. Okay, what did I say? Genesis 2, 15 through 17. Now God says you must choose between God and Satan. That's called free will. And the free will is not free will to do anything you want, because you can't do anything you want. You can do what God commands, or you can do what Satan says, but you can't do anything else. I'll give you an example. Here's how you prove that to yourself. Get you a clean piece of paper out, set it down, get you a pencil, and sharpen it, and get ready. And here's what you do. You draw something you have never seen, and do not use things you have seen before, such as circles and lines and shading and so on and so forth. Draw something you've never seen, and do not use the rules of what you've known before. Well, you can't do it. And the reason you can't do it is because things have to be exampled in front of you. We're not capable of a third choice. It's either God or Satan. There is no third choice. There's no fence on which to sit. There's no gray area. It's all truth or a lie. It's all black or it's white, or it's all light or it's dark. It's as simple as it can be. It doesn't make it easy. Okay, just because it's simple doesn't make it easy. Now, free will is a choice between good and between God and Satan as a master. Let's take a look. Chapter 2, verse 15. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. And the Lord commanded the man, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die. Real simple. Listen to what he said. You are free. Free for what? What does it mean? Inside the law, that any tree in the garden except for this one tree, you're free. So when I was a kid, we had a backyard, and it wasn't very big, but it was our backyard. And behind it was a railroad track that went along there, and behind that, way off from the railroad track all the way back, was the Gulf of Mexico, and there was nothing back there but salt grass and alligators and snakes and all kinds of things that it's really dangerous to be out there. And so in next door on our left side there was a lady, and she had her property. We didn't have a fence there. And on the other side was a lady, and she had her property. And our father said, boys, you can play in this backyard. You can do anything in the backyard. You can't be in her yard. You can't be in her yard, and you the ditch there and onto the road track and across there. You can play in the backyard. You can do anything you want to in the backyard. You're free in the backyard. In other words, Freedom comes from within laws that are set by the master. And so he's saying here, you are free to eat anything here. You're not free to eat that. Okay, so free will was to eat of the fruit that God told them to eat, and if they wanted to, they would eat the other, but he said there's consequences for both actions. If you eat of all the other fruit, you'll live, but if you eat of the fruit of the tree of good and evil, knowledge of good and evil, then you're going to die, period. So then look over, so he says this, showing us that choices that Adam and Eve had. Now, he does this very plainly for us to be able to see. He puts, the Bible's full of narratives and dialogues and insights, as well as laws and history, for us to be able to see how people looked at things. He even shows us their brain, what they're thinking, how they feel about it, like with Adam and Eve, not Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, and how Cain wanted to kill Abel because he was mad about it and he felt rejected and all this. So he even shows us inside the brain. So we can then truly make a good decision. Now look what happens over in Genesis 3 and verse 2. Now, the woman said to the serpent, he said, okay, let's go back. Bottom of verse 1. Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat from fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die. What does that mean? When we read in Genesis 2, God does not say you must not touch it. But if you spend time with a child and you're trying to help them understand that they should not do something. Look, this fire will burn you, son. Don't mess with it. Don't mess with it at all. Matter of fact, don't even touch it. So you spend time with them and they try again and again and again, or they go over it, and you make sure they understand by saying, look, don't even think about it. Don't even mess with it. Don't touch it. So here we see that time has been spent for God to have impressed upon them that this law they must keep or they will die. And we know that more than likely there has been children born already to them because of two things. One, the fact that, he said, now you're going to, in Genesis 3, what would that be? Verse 10, he says, now you're going to have pain increased in childbirth. So it'd be odd for them to give an increase in something they hadn't already had. And two, that when they realized they were naked, they were ashamed. They're not ashamed together. A husband and wife wouldn't be ashamed together. So they obviously had some kids around, and they realized what they were thinking and what they were doing, and that brought shame upon them, and so they got dressed in leaves. The first fashion walk. Now we can see here that we're going to have to choose our thought process has got to be from either God or Satan. Now let's talk about some of the other things. I'm running out of time here. In the beginning, there was God, Satan, angels, man. Man came later, but angels that he had created. Now, here's a question for you. When God created the angels, and he created them for the purpose of choosing to follow him or follow Satan, what was the reasoning? Why did he do it? Was he just playing around, or what was the thinking process? Now, we know by looking at why man was created that this was a prelude to moving it to the physical realm. And so here's what was going on. When he moved it to the physical realm, What did he say about man? Your man was created a little lower than the angels. How do you mean there? How do you mean that man is lower than the angels? Was your spirit lower than the angels? Well, I never seen my spirit. But if I'm going to be able to see God and be able to see the spiritual realm and live with God forever, obviously my spirit's pretty well equal to the angel spirit. In fact, the angels are going to be serving me if I stay faithful, and you if you stay faithful. So obviously we're going to be pretty well the same. So how are we lower? And it's because we're created physical. And what's the one thing we cannot do in this realm that they can do in that realm, the angels? They could see God and Satan. We cannot. We're still expected to choose, just like Satan, the angels did, but we cannot see God and Satan. So we're made a little lower in the fact that we are in a different plane where we can't see the spiritual realm at all. Now, because that's true, you can see why man was created. There's an end product to this. And point number 3, this is a war between God and Satan. And the word war there means wrong against right. Satan comes against God. Now, God established, when he created the world, he established the laws as to what is right. Governments, money, husband and wife, not same-sex relationship, not even hooking up or any of that kind of stuff. He set the laws of what is right, and in that there is honor and freedom. Just like I was free in the backyard. Doing what was right in the backyard was right and honorable until I broke the law. And let me tell you, my father had a little belt hanging on the wall. It said, and above it was a sign that said, "I need thee every hour." And I think some days he used that belt every hour on the hour. But I knew the consequences. If I did what he said, I would be at peace with him. If I did not, then the consequences were I was going to be punished by him. Now, this war between God and Satan are for a purpose. What is the purpose of the war between God and Satan? I wish I had time to stop here and let you say. I'm fast running out of time. But the reason is the end product. What's the end product? It's not about you. It's not about me. It's not about any of us. What's the end product? The end product is God and Satan being separated forevermore, for eternity. Now, that was not the rule when he created the angels. We don't hear anything about that. But when he created the mankind, he made them so much lower, and he said, okay, here's the end product. If they continue to follow me, if man can follow me, being created in this fashion, then at the end of time, we're going to separate Satan from me, God said, forevermore. And then there were some stipulations. When you look at it, when you see the any war, you know that the enemies identified, and there's always only two. There's always those who are over here and those who are over there. Now, there may be different groups of people banded together, but there's just a friend or foe. That's it. And there's right or wrong, and there's good or evil. And the whole end product of a war is peace. When do you have peace? When everybody in the land follows the same law. Okay, so the creation of angels, point 1 under C, was to choose between God or Satan. And for us, it's the same thing. We're to choose whether or not we're going to follow God or follow Satan. That is not the end product of the war. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. There were some conditions, such as God had to become man, even after sin became the normal way of life. It is more normal for people to be sinners than it is for them to be Christians, right? I mean, look around, look at the churches. There are very few people in the church, a whole bunch of people in the world. Why? Because it is far easier to do wrong than it is to do right. Why is it that people who are great marksmen in the army get the medals and everything, and they're pointed out, oh, look at him, he's a marksman, he's a great marksman. Why? Because it takes more work to do it right than it does to do it wrong. You can shoot anywhere and say, hey, I shot a gun. But to be a marksman, you have to shoot so accurately. You have to work hard on it, really work hard on it, and practice again and again and again. Now, to follow God or follow Satan, you are locked in it. If you follow God, let's say, for example, when we're born, we're following God. We're not accountable until the age of accountability, which we can go into in another, by the way, and what does the Bible say about that? There is one definitive answer to the age of accountability. But when you hit that age, if you sin, immediately you're a what? You're an enemy of God. You're estranged from your Father. Okay? So now, how do you get back? Because you're there. God, being a loving God, knew that this is so severe and that we're not going to be able to see God. And the whole purpose of this is the separation of God from Satan forevermore, that he made sure that mankind would have a way back to him. Hence, Jesus who had to come, live as a man, not sin, die, and then be resurrected. We'd see that was the whole point of it. And so when he said it's finished, the war was over. You say to me, I almost heard you. Well, then why are we still fighting this war? I mean, we're tired of it. I'm tired of being hurting. I'm tired of suffering. Why didn't God just take us home? Because the opponent has not considered himself vanquished. How many years did we find Japanese soldiers on islands and stuff still fighting a war? What about the Civil War? There are people today who still want the South to rise and still fighting the Civil War. They won't give up. The book of Job is a great book for that. The book of Job is a story of you and me. Well, you can just take it for you. And Job is slandered by Satan. You know, there are 3 times we hear Satan's voice in the Bible. One is here in the garden, where he slanders God to man. And the second time is in the book of Job, where he slanders Job, or man, to God. And the third time we hear his voice, he is slandering. That means he's lying about. He's slandering God, man, Jesus. So now, in the wilderness. So now, that's who he is and what he does. He lies. That's who he is. So because God established the facts, the truth, by creating the world and creating all the laws by which we live, then the Satan comes in and puts an opposing view, a diametrically opposed view, okay? And this diametrically opposed view is called, or is defined by God as a lie. A lie is a truth with something missing or added. So you have to have the established truth first. You have to have that God created the earth and made the earth and made all the laws. Then Satan could come and establish an untruth. And for any one truth, there could be a myriad of lies, because there could be a lie that's so close to the truth, or there could be lies all the way out to they're just stupid. Like the fact that there is a God, and yet, and he wants you to do certain things, and he's going to bless you in certain ways, and so on. And you think, okay, well, right down the road here, there's another church. They call themselves a church, but they don't follow God, and they do not talk about go to heaven correctly. And so they understand that there's a God in the U.S. sins that have to be removed, but they do not use the fact that you have to give water to remove them. And so they're so close to the truth, but they're not the truth. What is it? It's a lie. And then there's this people way off in the middle of nowhere who are saying things like, well, there is no God, there are no lies, there is no consequences. You can do right or wrong, because there is no right or wrong. All there is action, and so do whatever you want. We saw some of that the other day in Minneapolis, where they were just destroying everything. Why were they doing that? Not because they're following God, but because they're following Satan. And they're not here, they're way off over here. What about this guru that was here in Oregon, man? And then people come in there and they thought he was God, and they would give him all their money. They felt guilty because they were wealthy. Let me tell you something. If they think they're wrong for being wealthy, then so were all the greats in the Bible, like Abraham and Job and Lot and David and Solomon. Well, what's wrong with wealth when you use it for God? Nothing. What's wrong with wealth when it owns you, with the rich young ruler? Now something's wrong, because it owns you, not the other way around. And he thought he was nothing without the money. But if he had given his money away, he'd realize he had the ability to make more. He had all the contacts, he had all the ability, he had everything he needed to be able to make more. Now, when you die, you're locked in that choice. So when when Job was living, and he said, Satan said to God, you know what? He won't follow you. He'll slip, and he won't do it. He won't love you and care about you. And he said, well, sure, you've got hedges around him. No wonder, Satan said. And God said, you can do these things. And here for 30-something chapters, Job suffered. He lost everything. He lost his standing. He lost his kids. He lost his wealth. He lost his wife. She was alive, but she didn't care anything about him. He lost his health. He lost everything, but he would not leave his God. But time went by when he suffered and suffered and suffered, and finally, Satan left. And after Satan left, God could bless him again. See, that's the story of us. Here we are in this physical realm on this earth, and we are suffering in our daily pain-filled lives. And after this is over, we'll go to heaven, and God will be able to bless us again. A great picture, and a great picture to understand it. So we were created, and we're here for the purpose of the war, not for whatever your dreams or hopes or needs are. We're here for the purpose of the war. We're created as warriors to do as God commands. And if not, guess what? We're doing as Satan commands, and we've lost the war. Well, our time is up on that, and that's all of point 1. Now, next week, we're going to talk about the physical realm, and how it was designed, why, when, all that sort of stuff. That'll be the point we're going to do next week of the physical realm, and we're going to have an hour's worth on that. We did 50 minutes on this. And if you have any questions, and which I know you will, you can post them. But I'm telling you, consider this and see the verses and understand how God equates God and Satan as true enemies. And if Satan was a created being, you just whip him off, and he, we wouldn't have the pain and suffering we have. There's a purpose and a reason we're here. Hang on to that, because that purpose and reason is important. If we understand this, then we're able to master it and be able to take it. Let me give you an example. There was a guy who lived over in the Maryland area, or Delaware, I can't remember. Nice guy. And he was born to a mother who didn't love him. He didn't know his parents. His father, I mean. His mother didn't even know who his father was. And she hated him because he was there. And he came to me, we were talking about it, he said, I don't understand this. Why is it that God allows me to be in such a cruel situation as to be born unloved? So I asked him a question. I said, are you married? Oh, yes. He said, I've been married 50-something years. Do you have any children? Oh, yes, I have children. I have grandchildren. I said, do you love them very much? And they love me. Oh, we just have a great time together. I said, And what you're saying is Satan didn't win. You can just imagine Satan there slandering this man or slandering mankind to God and saying, you know what, you could not put a man in this condition and him grow up and love you. And when you do that and you grow up and love God, not only have you done what's right before your God, but you have ceased that horrible style of living that your mother had, where she hated her children and she didn't care. And what do your children have? Love and acceptance. Now look how you've arrested that behavior and not passed it on. This is what warriors are supposed to do. Hold their ground for God and be the kind of people that God wants you to be. Understand there's a God, and he's the source of all that's good. All the thoughts that come into your mind that are good are from God. All the thoughts that come into your mind that are evil are from Satan. Simple as that. Thank you for being with me today. And we're going to stop this. See you next week.